All right, so we're going to move into our picks for week 11 in college football and week 10 in the NFL. Classic SEC matchup coming up. Alabama and LSU. This one should be a playoff eliminator. Both teams right now are at 6-2. It's still early November, so I would assume no three-loss team should even be in the conversation right now while there are still undefeated teams. So with that being said, I think LSU is going to be the one getting eliminated here. Look, Alabama, they have obviously had their ups and downs this season. I mean, look over the last month, they had that huge win against Georgia, lose to Vandy, almost lose to Carolina, lose to Tennessee, and then whoop up, a dead Missouri team. LSU, on the other hand, they've been more consistent as of late. They just had that big loss to Texas A&M in their last game, which was really, Marcel Reed. But I think for me, it's really just comes down to this. At their absolute best, which team is better? I think it's Alabama. Jalen Milroe, as long as he can just avoid throwing stupid interceptions, and if he's able to be dynamic, get the ball out to Ryan Williams, and everybody's talking about him. He's 17. I got it. But you get the ball out to your playmakers. Don't make any stupid mistakes. I think Alabama will get this one, but it's going to be tough. It's obviously out there in Louisiana, so that's going to be a huge thing as well. But I'm going to call it Alabama. We'll see how it turns out.
Yeah, I got to go Alabama on this one. I think it's going to be a dogfight. I think these two teams are going to put on a show for sure. But really, it does come down to just like, which team do I trust here a little more? And I do find it crazy that LSU lost to Texas A&M, really to Marcel Reed, and then A&M turned around and lost to South Carolina by like 22, which is crazy. South Carolina has been like the demon of the SEC, constantly putting people to the test, including these two teams, who both narrowly escaped that test. And I just think that Alabama's a little more trustable. Right, Jalen Milroe is really bad with his kind of like random interceptions, but so is Garrett Nussmeier. And as a matter of fact, while Nussmeier leads Milroe in passing touchdowns by 7, he also leads him in interceptions by 3. Milroe's got his rushing touchdowns as well. So these two guys are both good at football. No one's can take that away from them. But I think that the LSU Tigers, despite having the home field advantage, are just a little more mistake prone and a little less explosive on offense. And I think this one's going to come down to a last minute field goal or maybe even a walk off big touchdown from Ryan Williams. Definitely a big matchup. Looking forward to this one. I do believe that whoever loses this game should be eliminated. A 3-loss team that should wrap it up, even with the new format, especially with the way the SEC is going. I think that putting one of these teams to 3 losses, just go and wipe that out and move it along. So it should be a good game. I think it'd be super fun. I expect it to be really, really close, but I expect the Crimson Tide to come out on top of this one. Had some narrow wins and had some weird losses this season. The Tennessee game was a tough one, but I think this one will be kind of like the Tennessee game, except you flip it around and Alabama comes out on top at the last minute.
Yeah, so we're going to move to the NFL. And of course, we got to talk about the Chiefs. They're still undefeated. They beat the Bucs on Monday night in overtime, narrow victory over there. Had a little bit of an injury scare with Patrick Mahomes. They're going up against an AFC West rival, the Broncos, who I guess thank God we didn't pick them last week because we will look stupid. They embarrassed themselves against the Ravens, losing 41-10. And, maybe if they had won that game, we probably would have considered picking them in this one. But, nah, we're going Chiefs all the way. Chiefs will stay undefeated, win another game, 9th game of the season. And right now, I mean, look, they're at least picking it up on offense. Obviously, last 4 games, 26, 28, 27, and 30, even in overtime. Compared to early in the season, even still with all these weapons out. And that defense, allowing 20 points, I guess, is their kind of like worst type of game, 2024. So that defense still should be pretty good. I think at this point, the Broncos, I don't want to say they're exposed, but I think we're going to see some weaknesses now from the Broncos for the rest of the season. Kind of get a little bit more highlighted. I don't want to say exposed there, but highlighted. And Chiefs should probably get a pretty easy win. I'd say 7 to 10 points.
Yeah, Broncos have a really impressive win against the Buccaneers, which is crazy because their win against the Bucs is certainly more convincing than the Chiefs win against the Bucs, which is against kind of an injured Bucs core. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
when you really look at it, the Broncos' other wins really don't jump out to you as that impressive. They beat the Jets 10-9. They beat the Raiders. They play their next divisional opponent, the Chargers. They lose that narrowly. They get beat up, or they beat up the Saints, and then they beat up the Panthers, and they come to a screeching halt and get smashed by the Ravens, which we thought would be closer. So glad we didn't sway not too far that direction. As much as I want to say that the Broncos have a great upset chance here, I do think there is an upset chance. It's going to be a little tougher because they're at Arrowhead. That is a hard place to play. And it's a divisional opponent, so like obviously I think the Broncos have one of the higher chances, and maybe they get him on the second go around. But this one just feels like they're not going to get it. Chiefs are going to move up to 9-0. Broncos coming off a pretty rough loss, and then coming off, there's just like running into this Chiefs team that has just survived this overtime game against a pretty tough opponent. I feel like the Chiefs are a little more poised. I feel like D-Hop is really adding a lot of like dynamicness to this offense. I do think, and we can bookmark this if we talk about the second game. I do think there's a potential that Denver takes a game from Kansas City this year. I just don't think this is going to be the one. Maybe it's the home field advantage. Maybe it's just coming off the last few weeks. I got the Chiefs probably like a 28 to 21, 28 to 18, something like that. Broncos won't look horrible, but they probably won't win this one.
Yeah, now we're going to talk about two teams that, kind of been in a weird spot in the last couple weeks. San Francisco and the Buccaneers. We just talked about the Bucs losing to the Chiefs. They've really been on a skid, partially some injuries, but, overall just not the greatest performance over the last month or so. They've lost 4 of their last 5 after starting 3-1. Niners, they basically going, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss for most of this season. Last game a couple weeks ago against Dallas, that one wasn't, fantastic, but they did what they had to do against the Dallas team that right now is obviously not very good. We're going to split on this one, so I'm actually going to take the 49ers. So Christian McCaffrey, he's back. I'm not expecting a ton from him. Obviously, they're not going to I would assume they wouldn't put him out there and have him run, 15 times and have, force 10 or so catches, but I'd assume they use him sparingly. See what they still have, like make sure he's good before they just throw him out there to the wolves. But I think right now, man, it might just be a confidence thing for the Bucs. And look, they had a good game against the Chiefs. I get it, but having lost this much in the last few games, the injuries, like I just don't think that they really got it in them to win this game. And 49ers right now, I think this is where they have to kind of start going on a run if they do want to make it back to the NFC title game. So I'm going to stick with them.
Yeah, this is a tough one. This is one that I definitely thought about for a little bit here. Something about the Buccaneers, just I feel like they're due for one. It is crazy to start 3-1 and end up 4-5 just that quickly. Seems to be something going on in the NFC South with the two teams that started higher up. But this one just feels like the Buccaneers, even without their big weapons, are kind of on one. I do think they're going to be tested for sure. I think Christian McCaffrey is not going to come back at 100%, but he is going to come back, and that is going to be tough. They can probably use him and Jordan Mason in a dual role. Mason was just activated as well from his little questionable injury. By pattern's sake, the Niners are due for a loss, but I'm not going to go by their win-loss pattern that they've been on. These teams are, I think, very similar. I think their defenses are pretty stout sometimes, and other times they, for some reason, just kind of shake up and leave a lot to be desired. And their offenses can really, really roll, and sometimes they really, really don't. I think that overall, for me, the Buccaneers, even without Godwin and Evans, have had that offense kind of moving at super high rate the whole season. And maybe the first week back for CMC is just going to be a little too tough. I don't think this will be like a blowout win either way. This one can honestly go to overtime again. Maybe the Bucs don't lose the coin toss in that one. But maybe I'm just riding the high of them competing so well against the Chiefs with an injury. But I'm going to take the Bucs on this one. Maybe like a 31 to 28. Pretty good battle. I think this will be. These two teams are super similar to me, so I think they'll play very, very well. But we'll see. Both of them have been weird. They both have Tampa Bay has a losing record at home, and the Niners have a losing record away. So can't really factor in the home stadium here. But I think the Bucs will take this one narrowly.
Yeah, so we're going to move to another game we're actually going to split. I changed my pick, right before we started because I was just feeling it. Steelers and Commanders. It's going to be a pretty huge game. 6-2 Steelers. They're coming off a bye against the Commanders. 7-2. Coming off of another close win against the Giants, who coincidentally also just played the Steelers in their last game. So Look, I think I was going to go with the Commanders just like you because I felt like even with that great Steelers defense, going up against the quarterback like Jaden Daniels going up against that Commanders offense, I thought it would have been too much. But, when we think back about it, that Bears game we talked about a couple weeks ago, they got down there multiple times with chances to score touchdowns. They didn't. Bears were bending but not breaking for the most part until that last play. And Steelers defense, that's kind of what they've been great at for, the last 4 or 5 years now when they've been carrying the team. And now that they actually do have a semblance of an offense, and I understand, the last couple of games were against the Jets and the Giants. Before that, the Raiders, when Justin Fields was still starting. But now that they actually have an offense to go along with that defense, I think if they have to be really disciplined with Jaden Daniels out there. But I think if that defense can come out kind of looking like the Bears defense did, and obviously I would take the Steelers defense over the Bears right now. I think the Steelers have a good chance to win this one. I think they'll have to probably force a couple turnovers here, obviously, but I think they got a good chance to win.
Yeah, this one's a tough one. I mean, these two teams are really good. Obviously, they're 6-2 and 7-2. Steelers are 3-1 on the road. Commanders are 4-0 at home. Not a whole lot to be upset about on either of those stats here. The Bears game makes this one really weird for me. I picked the Commanders. I feel safe in that pick. I know this will be a great game. But the Bears game, obviously, for a while, the Bears only allow 12 points, and then you get walked off in the most insane way possible. So it's not really it feels like an enigma to judge the Commanders off of that, especially against that kind of defense. And I would say the Steelers defense is better than the Bears defense. So I think this one is going to be tough. The Commanders defense has ramped itself up a little bit recently. So I think we're going to be looking at a kind of a middle ground scoring area. But I think that one thing, the Commanders have faced a few tough defenses, not a whole lot. But the one thing that they have been good about is their turnover ratio. They have not turned the ball over very much at all. And the Steelers are good at forcing those turnovers, or at the very least getting pressure onto the quarterback. I think this is going to be an incredible matchup to see how this offense, especially with a quarterback like Jaden Daniels, who's so good at escaping pressure and so good at making sure the ball stays in his team's possession, goes up against a team full of guys that are really great at putting you on the ground and taking the ball from you. I think it is going to be really tough. I would say that I'll take the Commanders in this one with like a 17 to 14 type of score. This game's going to be good, but I think it is going to be a little more defensive focused. That Commanders offense should fly high usually, but this is a really tough defense. I could see it swaying either way. The Steelers are not a team that I don't believe in. I think that they have been good. Russ came back and had the offense looking electric, and I know, like you said, it's against the Giants and the Jets. Jets defense ain't all that bad. So, it's definitely been tough this year, but I think this one is a great game. I see why you switched at the end. I think the Commanders' offense is just a little more consistent and a little more ready to go, and I think just a little more trustable for me. So, gonna take the Commanders here narrowly, but I think this is a fun one to split on. I hope that this game is good enough for us to cover at the beginning of next week.
Yeah, and I think this one will be too. Lions, Texans, Sunday Night Football. Thank God we got a good primetime game. Um, for me with this Lions Texans game, we're both going to pick the Lions. Texans, they got to bounce back. They just lost to the Jets, who have been awful. All right, even with Aaron Rodgers, even with Devontae Adams, they have been awful for most of this season. They just lost to them on Thursday night last week. Had obviously a little bit of a layoff since then. Had that Colts game where most of the story was AR tapping out, but the Colts very well could have won that game. And then that game against Green Bay. So CJ Stroud hasn't had the best past couple of weeks, but he's also not really getting too much help for that offensive line. Like the offensive line has not been good at all. And of course, with injuries at the receiver position, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, you're going to have issues with two of your top three guys out. So with that being said, the Lions, even though they didn't play like the greatest game last week, we talked about it against Green Bay, they did what they had to do. They played well enough to win in a pretty bad condition. So I've been riding with them for like the past 3 weeks now. I'm still going to ride with them. picking the Lions.
I think I've wavered on the Lions a little bit with the Minnesota game, but otherwise I've been high on the Lions. I think I'm gonna have to stay with them here. The Texans look really confusing, and some of it is just that O line. I've made this joke plenty of times on the show, but it's just a timeless one. I think you could put me on a D line, and I could get through the Texans O line. Like it's just I don't know what they're doing, but they have let people get a lot of pressure to C.J. Stroud, and that does not usually contribute to positive offense, especially when you have so many pieces out. You really got to have everything work well. Um, the Jets game, they get stomped. I mean, it's close for a little bit, but Aaron Rodgers locks in, gets a few touchdowns to Garrett Wilson. That one's over. The Colts game, they win. Maybe it's because Anthony Richardson got tired. Green Bay game is just unfortunate. They beat up the Patriots, which is impressive, but that's really going too far away from the current Texans. Whereas the Lions have just stayed consistent. They beat the Seahawks 42 to 29, then they beat Dallas to death 47-9. They play a really tough opponent in the Vikings, and they win 31-29. And they turn it right back around and play the Titans, who are not really the cream of the crop here. Beat them 52-14, and then hold Green Bay to just 14 in that rivalry game and beat them 24-14. I think the Lions are just a little more consistent. The offense is rolling on all cylinders. It's really hard to make Jared Goff miss. It's been really hard to get him on the ground. I think that they've played really well. That running game is insane. I don't think the Texans defense is going to hold up against it. And even without Aiden Hutchinson, I don't think the Texans O-line can keep C.J. Stroud safe enough in this game. This one should be a really good football game still, and I'm excited for it to be a primetime game. But I do think the Lions are going to roll over and improve to 8-1 and just keep this train moving here. So it should be exciting. But yeah, I'm not too moved by the Texans in this particular matchup. I feel like this is a good team going up against a really great team, and some of that is the injuries the Texans have. They have the next year C.J. Stroud gets out of the sophomore slump, get the O-line a little more polished, get your receivers back. I think you've got the chance to be back into a great team category. But right now, for me, this is just great team in the Lions going up against good team in the Texans. Texans won't look bad, but probably won't be able to come out of this with a win.